Today is Tuesday, and I thought I would do a little check-in on how some of the plants are doing this week, as well as talk to you about a couple of the plants that I'm struggling a little bit with and my plan to help them out moving forward. So you can see the peppers and onions are doing really well. We've got some buds starting on the bell pepper plant, so that's going to be really great. And then the onion shoots are coming up nicely. The cascade hops are also doing really well. You can see they're vining right up that string just like they should, and they're very happy about that. Kale and dill also look great. For some reason this pot has just really taken off. The kale and dill in there are growing a lot bigger than this pot. I'm not quite sure why that is. The pots are a little bit different as far as where the drainage holes are, but I didn't think it would affect it too much, so we'll just keep an eye on that. Cucumbers and radishes are coming along well. You can see the radish heads popping up there, and then you can see the tops of the cucumber plants are starting to get some of their flowers, and then this one has started vining up the fence. This one I'll probably end up using this stand to kind of vine against. The mint is very happy. It's trying to jump out of its pot. It's growing so much, so I'm going to end up harvesting some of that this week, definitely. The marigolds are all flowering and happy. The lavender looks pretty good too. It's still kind of bushing out. Haven't seen any flower buds yet, but keep an eye out for that. More marigolds. The chives and the lettuce also seem to be doing well. The chives are getting pretty long, so I'll probably end up harvesting some of those this week as well. The lettuce is looking good. It looks like I'll probably end up harvesting some of that today too. The beets are coming along very well. Some of the seeds didn't sprout, but that happens. And then, oh look, we've got our first garlic shoot popping through. Cool, that's new. Squash plant is also looking good. You can see we've got a flower. This one looks like it's about to open. Got a whole bunch of flowers that are gonna open in there. Tomatoes and carrots are also doing great. You can see the carrot tops are starting to kind of ruffle out, which just tells me they're getting bigger underground. And then, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got a little tomato bud starting right there. We've got some flowers. This tomato plant is a little bit bigger, and it's still flowering. I don't see any tomato buds on it yet, but the carrots are also doing really well in this one. You can tell I was a little heavy-handed with the seeds on that one, but that's all right. Our herbs are all looking really nice, really happy and healthy. The nugget hops back here are also vining really well. They're looking good also. Overall, I'm thrilled with how all the plants are growing. They seem really happy, seem like they're getting a lot of good nutrients from the soil mix that I blended this year, and seem like they're getting the right amount of sun and things like that to really make sure that they're growing well. But if you notice, there's two plants that I skipped, and that was the jalapenos and the spinach. And those are just not progressing as well, and I'm gonna kind of show you what's going on with them. Also, no more slugs since last week, so I'm gonna keep going with the coffee grounds. It seemed to work really well, and I'll just sprinkle those maybe once a week or once every other week just to make sure I'm deterring the slugs to keep them away from the garden. Here are the spinach plants, and you can see the leaves have some sun splotches on them, and several of the plants are actually starting to bolt. You can see right in there. That's gonna actually create a flower here pretty soon. Same with this pot. This one's probably the most advanced. So this is actually gonna end up flowering right here. You can see the leaves are smaller. They're becoming more angular instead of nice and flat and round. When you taste them, they'll actually be a little bit more bitter as well. Plants like spinach tend to bolt when they're stressed, or when they feel that they've basically gotten all that they can from the current soil or environment that they're in. Bolting just means that they've stopped producing fruit and they've moved on to the flowering stage so that they can encourage pollinators to come and they can produce seeds to basically move forward with the next generation of their kind of plant. It's basically the plant's way of saying, I've had a good run, but I'm out. So I did some digging to try to figure out why the spinach, and no one else really seems to be having an issue with the garden setup this year. And some things that I learned are that spinach is actually more of a temperate weather plant. So it likes colder temperatures. It likes to be planted actually before the end of the frost season as a seed. And it tends to do better when the weather is cooler. And while spinach is technically a plant that likes full sun, when it's warmer and the temperatures are higher, they actually do better when provided with a little bit of shade. So I think my mistake with the spinach this year was a few things. One, I started it too late. And two, I bought them as plants instead of starting them from seeds. In the future, my plan will be to do an early spring plant, so before everything else is planted, as a seed, and then just plan on having 2 sets of crops. So the first one being that early season, and then the second one being in the fall, probably or late summer, and planting those as seeds also, so that I can try to extend that harvest season out into fall. So I've decided at this point just to go ahead and let these plants bolt. I'm gonna let them flower. It'll just encourage more pollinators to come to the garden. And then once the plants actually die off, I'll collect the seeds and save those to do another plant for spinach in the fall. And then in the meantime, I'm actually going to plant some bush beans in their place. Those I can grow from seeds, and they tend to do well in pots also. Bush beans do like the warmer months, so I think that'll be a good middle of summer crop for me. And then once those are harvested, then I'll plan to replant the spinach for the fall. So the other plant that's not doing quite as well is my jalapeno plant. It's not doing terribly, it's just not thriving like the other plants. It just seems to kind of be hanging out. It's gotten a little bit bigger, but not a ton. There's not really any evidence of flowers or fruiting that's trying to happen. And you can see the carrots are sprouting a little more sparsely. Part of that might be that I didn't put as many carrots as I did in the tomato plants, because that was a lot. I maybe didn't seed it as heavily, but overall this pot just isn't as happy as the other pots. So I think there's a few potential reasons that the jalapeno plant might not be as happy as the other plants. One, I was doing some reading, and apparently jalapeno plants do best in temperatures between 65 and 80 degrees. And we've had a little bit more mild summer so far this year. So we've had a few days that are in the 80s, but really not many. And so most of the days I think have been in the 70s, but we've definitely had a few that have been 60s, even high 50s. It's possible that maybe waiting to plant the jalapeno plant later in the season might have been a good idea. Also, you just can't really predict weather temperatures and what those are gonna look like. So I think that's one potential answer. I think another possibility might actually be the pot that it's in. I was looking at the pot this morning, and it actually has a almost like a bowl in the bottom of it that's attached that is holding water. And so I'm going to see if I can actually take that off because I'm worried that the pot isn't getting good drainage because of that water that's just sitting in the bottom. So you can see this is what I'm talking about here. There's just water sitting under here that I didn't really realize was happening. I'm gonna see if I can just take that right off. Oh yeah. Yeah, so that's all just been sitting under the plant. So that might be, maybe it's just causing some issues with the soil not being able to maintain the right water content. So we'll get rid of that and give it a few days and see what happens. I wonder if that's what's happening with this kale planter also, because it has these drainage holes on the side, but it doesn't have any on the bottom. So I wonder if maybe that's why this one isn't doing as well and this one has just taken off, because this one does have drainage holes here, and then it's got one in the very bottom too. So I might drill a drainage hole and see what happens with this one. All right, so I added a couple drainage holes down just below the ones that already existed. So they're right along the rim of the pot. I also added a big one at the bottom. It already had one at the bottom, but I just added another one. So I don't know if that has anything to do with why there's such a difference between the growth in these two pots, but that's the only thing I can think of that's different. So we'll try it and see what happens. As you know by now, I'm kind of figuring this out as I go. So I'll definitely let you know all the mistakes that I make along the way and things I wish I had done differently so that you don't make the same mistakes. Although I have to say, even with some of these things not going as well as I would have hoped, like the spinach bolting after just a few weeks in the ground, they don't really feel like mistakes. They feel like just learning and growth and figuring things out. I think sometimes we focus so much on productivity and things having to just go exactly right, that when they don't go exactly like we planned, we think it's a failure or a mistake. And I think one of the things this garden is teaching me is that, you know, a mistake doesn't have to be devastating. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, it can be a really good thing because it means I'm learning and growing. And, you know, in the case of these spinach plants, they're going to produce seeds that I'm going to use again. And so it's, you know, it's not a failure. It's just things happened a little differently than I thought they were going to. And we're going to roll with it and make it work. You know, there's so many unpredictable factors when you have a garden. There's, you know, pests like the slugs, there's the weather, there's a lot of things that we can't account for. And so it's not gonna ever go perfectly right. And I think that's a lot of the beauty in it. Today is Saturday. And as I mentioned earlier, I decided to plant some bush beans because they're more resistant to the summer heat. And so I decided to go with this variety, the Royal Burgundy, mostly just because I thought the purple pods were really pretty. And since these are bush beans, I'll be able to grow them well in the containers. While I was looking at seeds, I just couldn't resist getting some pumpkin seeds. So I'm gonna plant these today too, because this variety takes about 110 days to produce fruit. And so they should be ready around the middle of September, which will be perfect. Just finished watering everything. I put the pumpkins, or the 2 black pots in the back, and then I stuck the bush bean pots up there, kind of shuffled things around, moved the spinach down a little bit. I stuck the marigolds, moved them on either side so that they could just be closer to some of those plants to try to deter some of the different bugs. Shouldn't be a problem since they're planted so far apart and the squash are already flowering, but I did put the pumpkins over here just to try to prevent any cross-pollination. Like I said, there should be time-wise far enough apart that shouldn't be an issue, but just in case. We have a squash flower! And look at the cucumber flowers! Oh my goodness! These just opened up this morning. Beautiful. If you have any gardening stories you want to share with me, or if you have any questions that I might be able to answer, you can just connect with me below in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so that you can stay updated on all the videos as they come out. Happy gardening, friends!